Okay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Cadet First Class Emily Barexa, and I have the honor of serving as the Spring Cadet Wing Commander at the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs this semester. On behalf of Lieutenant General Clark, the Space Force Association, on behalf of Lieutenant General Clark, the Space Force Association, and its corporate sponsor, CACI International, the Cadet Wing welcomes to USAFA our distinguished guest, Mr. Jared Isaacman. Today's discussion and Q&A presented by the Space Force Association will focus on innovation and how Mr. Isaacman has used integrity, a passion for service before self, and a drive for excellence to succeed in all he does. Facilitating the discussion is Colonel Matt Anderson. Colonel Anderson is a USAFA graduate from the class of '97, a former AOC from Cadet Squadron 4, a command pilot with more than 5,000 hours, and the Chief Operating Officer at the Space Force Association. Mr. Jared Isaacman is the 38-year-old founder and CEO of Shift4 Payments, and later this year will make history by launching as the mission commander of Inspiration4, the first all-civilian mission to space. With Mr. Isaacman serving as the mission commander, the other 3 seats will be given to a frontline healthcare worker, a small business owner, and to someone chosen at random from donations made to St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. Mr. Isaacman is donating the first $100 million to the fundraising effort and has pledged to raise another $200 million for St. Jude through the crew selection campaign. An innovator who started his first company from the basement of his family's home at the age of 16, Mr. Isaacman has been recognized as one of the country's leading entrepreneurs and has orchestrated several $1 billion worth of strategic transactions that have resulted in the dramatic growth of Shift4 Payments. Mr. Isaacman also founded Draken International in 2011. With a fleet of 150 tactical fighter aircraft, Draken owns and operates the world's largest commercial fleet of ex-military aircraft to support military training around the globe. A certified transport, acrobatics, and instructor pilot himself, Mr. Isaacman once set a world speed record for an around-the-world flight in a Cessna Citation at the age of 26. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jared Isaacman and Colonel Matt Anderson to the stage. Room, tent shut.
Take your seats, please. Thank you. Welcome, Jared.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Matt Anderson, and as Emily said, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Space Force Association. We'd like to welcome the cadets in the audience watching on live stream, as well as our audience at home, as well as our Space Force Association members and corporate members. Before we get going today, we're going to show you a quick 1 minute and 20-second video that I think really frames the Inspiration4 mission that Mr. Isaacman here is going to be doing in the fall.
We're calling our mission Inspiration4. It's the first all-civilian mission to space. And given that significance of that first, we're trying to be incredibly thoughtful about the people that are going to join us and represent us on this mission as part of the crew, as well as the organizations that we want to benefit from this effort, which is why we selected St. Jude Children's Research Hospital to be the charitable beneficiary of Inspiration4. This is a significant first step towards a world where everyone can go and explore amongst the stars. One of the things we hope to accomplish and why we named our mission Inspiration4, to inspire others to be able to do extraordinary, maybe even unthinkable things like go out and venture amongst the stars today, but also to inspire people what's possible that can still be done here on Earth. And if we can accomplish all of that, then we sure as heck better have tackled childhood cancer along the way.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that is inspiring to me and also to many of you. And for our audience at home that's watching, this is a period of the day at the Air Force Academy where oftentimes the professional military education is taught to the cadets. We've got over 4,000 cadets here. And Jared, you got to see a little bit of the leadership opportunities. We're about 2/3 of the way through the day with Jared. And Jared, do you mind telling the audience today a little bit what your morning was like?
Sure. Well, first, I'm glad I am able to take the mask off for a second so you guys can see that I've been literally smiling since I showed up here. This has been such an incredible experience. And by the way, this is it's such a deep honor to even be invited here, so thank you for this. Thank you for the Space Association and Lieutenant General Clark for this. This was amazing. My day began on the flight line. I got my first glider experience. So anything I've ever flown before, if there's no engine, it's a big problem. And this was incredible. So I had to really be tough in there. But I got to tell you, in some of the transitions from G's and positive to negative, I was crying inside. So.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was good to see from the ground as well, and while we were down there, we saw what the mission of the Academy really is about. It truly is a leadership laboratory here, and we got to see one cadet instructing another cadet on his first solo flight in a glider down there while Mr. Isaacman here is doing loops to music right above him. It was pretty neat to see. But as I was saying, this time of the day, every other day at the Air Force Academy, it's reserved for professional and military education. And what we're going to talk about today is the core values of the Air Force Academy, innovation, and then we're going to talk about what you chose in a similar mindset with this Inspiration4, and just to get your thoughts on it, looking at values, looking at innovation through a completely different lens than this audience often sees. So for those that don't know, the core values of the Air Force Academy and the Air Force are integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. And it's no secret that in December of 2019, when the Space Force was created with the stroke of a pen from President Trump, the Space Force thought they were going to have 18 months to stand up a completely new military service. However, he was told on that day, no, you're the real deal and you're the first one. So we have a 4-star general in the Space Force, and he knew exactly right away that he needed his Space Force Guardians, which is now what we call those in the Space Force. Very similar to soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, but they're called Guardians, and an appropriate word at that. That he's going to need innovative Guardians. Currently, there's only about 4,100 Guardians in the Space Force, and that total is going to grow 16,000 total in the Space Force. And if you think about the next smallest service in the Department of Defense, it's the Marines with about 180,000. So that kind of scopes how many Guardians will be in this service. And it's going to be very important. They've said over and over, both on the Air Force side with General Brown and the Space Force side with General Raymond, they need innovators. So I chose this picture right here. It's a great hero shot, and there's an aircraft behind there, but I wanted to let you have an opportunity to tell our cadets and our audience about what you were doing at about the age of 16.
Oh, yeah. So I started my company, which is the business that I'm still CEO of today. It's a public company now. It's called Shift4 Payments. And this was in 1999, and the world was changing in terms of commerce, like e-commerce. You could buy things online and such. So was fortunate to get a little bit of an education on the payment space at a young age and identify some opportunities. And then I thought the fastest way to capitalize on those opportunities, which was mostly about solving different inefficiencies that were pretty apparent in the commerce space, was to start my own business. And again, that became Shift4 Payments. And it's been a heck of a ride over the last 21 years.
So you're 16 years old, you're in your basement, starting your own company, and then a few years later, your passion for aviation starts growing. And we lead to this picture. And can you tell us where the innovative thought, that spirit, took you then?
Well, I'll tell you, it was like exhaustion that led me to flying. And my passion for aviation began as like a kid. I mean, I don't know if I can attribute it entirely to Top Gun or not, but I mean, I was playing like flight simulators on Atari computers and went to Aviation Challenge as It's kind of like the space camp equivalent for like fighter pilot stuff when I was like 12. So it was always there. And then, I got really wrapped up in my business because especially in any new company, like the odds are stacked against you. You have a very high, failure rate in the first year. So you got to really make it your top priority. And that's all I was doing, was literally just living in the basement and like waking up on my keyboard. And, after a couple of years, I was like, wow, I'm going to burn myself out before I'm even legally able to drink. So I gotta do something to, just balance some things out in life. And I just was like, I'm going to pick up my passion for aviation. And I started flying, and then I didn't stop. Like every opportunity I could, I was flying somewhere, and I wanted to race towards jets. And that took me into some really interesting aircraft, which took me into flying air shows, which ultimately gave birth to Draken International, which is, still a, pretty cool industry today, helping the Air Force, predominantly at NYSE Air Force Base and such. So my aviation kind of, career kind of took off really quick, but mostly because I needed to just introduce something else in my life other than just, banging away on the keyboard.
Yeah, I think that work-life balance, if there's any audience that understands that, is our cadets here today. So you mentioned Draken International. Many of them might not be familiar with that. Can you describe kind of from a strategic perspective why you started that company, why it's beneficial to the Air Force and the Department of Defense in general, and then just kind of how many jets did you have? What types of jets did you have? Tell us a little bit about that.
It's interesting because when I was still the CEO of Draken and, I was telling people about the business, I was like, this is the second coolest type of company in the world. The only thing that really trumps this is being able to go into space. So really interesting how life took me in that direction. It's an incredibly cool business. So when we were flying air shows, if you're not familiar, we did it in 2010 through my last show I flew was in 2014. And we had up to a 7-ship act. So we had 5 L-39s and 2 MiG-17s. And it was very much, actually we pretty much stole most of the show from the Thunderbirds. So it was very similar. We had 2 ex-Thunderbirds on our team, so they gave us permission. But there's only kind of so long you can do that. It's not, it's a big, expense. It's not really a commercial opportunity. So we wanted to pivot, in a different direction, but not lose like the great brotherhood we had flying together, all the good camaraderie. So what we set out to do was create a commercial air service company with fighter aircraft. And there was opportunity there. It's not just like a cool thing. And this is really important if you're, ever going down a business path, is like, it's great to be passionate and love what you're doing and all that, but like there has to be a real opportunity. There has to be a problem to solve or something to improve upon. And what we saw at the time, and again, this is like, call it 2011, is, 5th gen aircraft are slipping to the right, which means you're gonna have to depend on your 4th generation, fighter aircraft for a lot longer, which means every hour that's remaining on those aircraft becomes super precious because they're destined at some point for the boneyard, right? And with budgets shrinking, it meant the flight hour programs were shrinking, so people weren't gonna be able to get as much time in the cockpit as they otherwise would. And costs are going up on these older generation aircraft and such. So we had a couple different pillars, to the business model. And we were like, we could go out, buy an awful lot of aircraft that are actually pretty threat representative. In fact, many of the aircraft that we fly today at Nellis are the exact kind of aircraft that people might run into in certain parts of the world. And we could put up 6 of these fighter aircraft for the same cost per flight hour as an F-16. And you have a lot of seasoned pilots in there that are just doing red air so that you could allow blue forces to focus on their blue air tactics. And it was a great thing for the taxpayers and such too, because it does save a lot of money. And ultimately, it had a rough go in the beginning. We bought a ton of aircraft. We bought the New Zealand Air Force. We bought
Wait, did you say you bought the New Zealand Air Force?
Right. So they went from they disbanded all their combat capability and went to a defensive maritime type approach. So any aircraft that basically significant kinetic capabilities were essentially sold to us, which was very cool. And we bought aircraft in Germany and Czech Republic and Poland and South Africa and Spain, and it was really fun. But anyway, it took like 4 or 5 years to convince the Air Force that this might be worthwhile. And it was actually General Hawk Carlisle, when he took over at ACC, very familiar with adversary air from his prior experiences, said we need to do this. And we went from, in 2014, our unsolicited proposal saying there is no need or requirement for your service, to it became a $6 billion industry in about 6 months. So it was pretty cool.
That just kind of flowed off your tongue real easily, but at what age did you think of this?
Well, this was 2011, so I guess I was in my late 20s, 28, 29, around there.
Yeah, so that innovative thought, late 20s, you're like, obviously I'm having fun flying in air shows, but I got to find something that's going to make money, and there has to be a problem that's solved.
Right.
So you say the Air Force needs essentially bad guys to fly against our fighter pilots to make them better, fly the same techniques, tactics, procedures that the enemies fly, and similar aircraft. And you said, I think I'll do that, and also at the same time saving taxpayer money to do that because we needed the requirement anyway. That's fantastic. We're going to shift a little bit the discussion from innovation, which will flow throughout the discussion, but the core values that I mentioned earlier, and integrity, service, and excellence. And I think without a doubt, that's just weaved into everything you just said. But there's a gentleman on screen right now that you're recently paired up with. I think most guys know him, Elon Musk. And on February 1st of this year, it was a huge announcement. And a couple days later, the Super Bowl commercial when Inspiration4 was announced to the world. Can you tell me a little bit about what you and Elon were talking about, how you came up with this idea, and just let us know a little bit of background information on Inspiration4?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think, Elon and I were just kind of comparing notes a little bit on our history because our paths had crossed like almost 17 years ago. So Elon roots trace to payments industry as well. In fact, it was, his time frame of, when he started with PayPal was not, was overlapped very much with the early days of Shift4 Payments. So we were kind of comparing notes on where payments have gone over the years. And I think on Inspiration4, I mean, I really just kind of, reiterated my commitment to his vision, which I think is really incredible. Elon's an unbelievable entrepreneur. He is right up there with Steve Jobs in terms of amazing foresight to change the world. Elon's already changed the world, right? He's reinvigorated the world's interest in space exploration. He's brought back human spaceflight to the United States after nearly a decade since the space shuttle has retired, and he's done it in such an innovative way with reusability in rocket technology that makes space more affordable and therefore more accessible for a number of purposes, whether they're DoD, so we can get twice as many or 3 times as many assets up in space than we would have had SpaceX not existed, or for just the great adventure that is inevitable in space as we kind of go and journey beyond our world and into others. So he's a pretty incredible individual.
Yeah, I would agree. That innovative mindset of these two gentlemen is definitely historic, and we look forward to seeing the partnership not only where it's at now, but grow into the future. This next picture, I think, it says 1,000 words. This is what you're going to be catching a ride on later this fall. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to get your thoughts back to innovation a little bit before we talk more about your pillars with where the 4 came from and so on. Can you tell us about your thoughts on where SpaceX went, why you chose SpaceX, this platform, and the confidence you have in this thing getting you up there safely? I mean, you were just in a glider for about 30 minutes this morning, and you're having a good time, and it doesn't have an engine, but this is a different level. Yeah.
Well, this has 9 engines, so that's actually 10, sorry, if you count the second stage. This is really cool. I can just really brag on everything amazing that SpaceX and the team over there is doing, and everything that Falcon 9's achieved. What's interesting too is the innovation doesn't end even with something as impressive as that. And for everybody, even as you push boundaries to do things like landing a rocket on a ship in the middle of the water, and then up to or as little as 2 weeks later sending it up again. I mean, they're already on their 8th reuse of a first stage. In order to bring that rocket back to make space affordable and therefore accessible to everyone, it comes at a 12,000 pound expense to low Earth orbit. That's just your propellant that you're keeping on it, the weight around the rocket in order to come back and land Earth. That's a problem. As I described before, you need opportunity. It's a problem, or that's room for improvement, right? And I have no doubt that whether it's SpaceX that achieves it, or another company, or people in this room at some point, you're going to figure out a way to narrow that margin from 12,000. That's a huge deal, right? When anything in terms of mass getting to space. But I have tons of confidence around this. I personally think my airshow flying was substantially order of magnitude higher risk than going on Draken and Falcon 9. This is an amazing organization, unlike really any I've ever seen. And I've certainly seen the big defense primes out there and the pace they work at, and then you watch these guys, and they're just tearing ahead. It's really incredible.
Yeah, I think the idea of failing forward is huge, and you and I have been chatting throughout the day on that mindset. And I think it's important for our cadets here. That's okay. Can you talk about that and what you've seen lately?
Yeah, so interesting. So we announced Inspiration4 on February 1st. February 2nd, serial number 9 flew of Starship, right? And by the way, like you gotta, if you like the bold, like, appreciate what SpaceX does, how about the power move of pushing out serial number 9 and 10 at the same time, right? I mean, especially when there's a high probability that serial number 9 might not go right and serial number 10 is kind of in the vicinity. Such a power move, I love that. My wife was there, obviously, she was there for the announcement and everything, and she's, still absorbing, everything that's going on, and everybody's rushing to mission control to see Starship serial number 9 fly. Now, that's a developmental bird, and as we're, like, running to mission control, because they're just getting ready to launch, I'm like, telling my wife, Monica, I was like, just so you know, this is not the same spacecraft that I'm going on. I can't emphasize this enough, because right now, we're guessing it's like 1 in 3 chance they stick the landing. And it actually, obviously, they didn't stick the landing. It was another big fireball. And I'll tell you, every SpaceX employee who's in mission control is jumping up and down and cheering, right? Like there were no, like, sad faces at all when they just, blew up serial number 9. They were like, that's data. Yeah. Yeah, that's what we need to know. Because their mentality over there is fail fast, really fast, get the information you need, and accelerate progress. Even if you look at the time that, like, Elon really came out and said, hey, we're going to build Starship as kind of our, deep space kind of exploration vehicle. This is how we're going to get to Mars, and this is how we're going to get back to the moon. Only been a couple years. Like, seriously, it was only, a few years ago that Falcon Heavy was still going to be the launch vehicle to take, people into, like, a lunar mission, for example. So they come up with their ideas very fast. They build very quickly. They don't spend, like, a lot of time, trying to engineer out every last detail, because no matter what, you're going to have mistakes, right? You're never going to get it perfect at first go. So fail fast, fix it on the next one that's sitting already parked right next to it, and launch again. And I think we're going to see actually Starship serial number 10 launch tomorrow, so that'll be pretty
Tomorrow,
cool.
Yeah, we'll see if they stick the landing on number 10
Yeah,
tomorrow,
yeah.
But I can only imagine Monica, you're taking her to this huge event in the back of her mind. So you just announced yesterday you're going to go to space, and then this thing's exploding on the landing.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would go in my house, but those same themes are coming from the most senior levels of the Air Force and the Space Force. Accelerate, change, or lose is what we're hearing from the Air Force. General Raymond with the Space Force is talking about small, agile, speed, quick decisions, fail forward. And when we talk about the size of that Space Force, you have to be agile, you have to be innovative, and that's just key to everything they do. And we're going to have another picture come up here, shifting over to some more core values, and we saw a lot of it in the video. When the military and the Air Force is talking about service, integrity and excellence. And why did you pick St. Jude as the partner for this incredible historic mission as the first all-civilian space mission? Why were they the ideal partner?
Yeah, so, I've been fortunate in my aviation career to go on a couple interesting adventures. I did that around the world flight, and that was to raise funds for actually the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Every air show we did was dedicated to the Make-A-Wish Foundation as well. We brought a lot of the Wish families out to every show, and it's just acknowledging that we're all really fortunate in life, and there's a lot of people that get dealt a really bad hand in life. And I think about all that I've been able to experience in life, and then I think about some of the families that are being treated right now at St. Jude, and I've seen an awful lot of letters and emails, especially over the last couple of weeks, and they were just dealt really horrible hand. And hopefully through the good work of St. Jude and donors and such, that many of them, will be able to grow up and have an amazing life, like one of my crew members, Haley Arsenault, who, 10 years old, bone cancer, gets treated at St. Jude, went through a really rough bout. She's a physician assistant now at St. Jude, helping other kids in the fight. But there are some that doesn't get to happen, and the story just ends way before it should. And we just got to do something about it. It's just there's a balance element to this whole thing. Like, you still have to make progress. You should be able to do, missions like Inspiration4 into space, because think of all the things that will come after that. But you have a responsibility too, especially with a big first like this, to try and do some substantial good here on Earth, and to make sure that the mission is kind of greater than what the kind of the act is in itself, which is, it's great we're going to low Earth orbit for a couple days, but the objectives we aim to achieve can be far, far bigger and wider reaching than that, and that's really why St. Jude plays such a big role in this.
Yeah, that's huge. And the crew selection process that you mentioned, We currently know only of 50% of the crew that's going to be on your crew of 4. But I really wanted you to hone in and talk to our cadets here and our audience back at home on the labels that you gave each crew position. Can you talk about those? As we talk about core values at the Air Force Academy, it's a very similar concept that you've established with Inspiration4.
Yeah, so I mean, all of this came together very, very quickly. So actually, I only knew that I was going to have this opportunity to lead Inspiration4 just like 48 hours prior to the launch of Crew 1. And I got to go there for it, which was pretty amazing. And again, just shows like, you know, how forward-thinking SpaceX team is, because at that point, you really only had, you know, one up and one down since the space shuttle. You know, so it was pretty kind of early on in it. But as soon as I knew that this was going to happen and that it was going to be the first, you know, civilian mission to space and all the amazing things that could follow, well, then that's where the responsibility element kicks into it. Like, you have to be incredibly thoughtful about all elements of it. Like, it can't just be about, you know, a space mission. It has to be about something bigger than that. You have to be able to make a real, you know, big difference here on Earth, you know, to earn the right to be able to do things up there among the stars, right? So that's where St. Jude came in. And then what else are you trying to achieve? What else is kind of that super big objective beyond just, you know, a low Earth orbit mission? And that's where inspiration comes in, to inspire people as to, you know, certainly what's possible up in space. But you know what? Not everybody wants to be astronauts someday. So that's where, you know, the crew selection process came in, is you wanted to bring somebody into every one of these crew member seats that could deliver a very powerful and inspiring message in their own right, many of which who, you know, may never want to be astronauts or put on a spacesuit, but might look at someone like Haley Arsenault, who represents, you know, the mission pillar of hope, you know, that you can face some really, you know, difficult and unforeseen circumstances in life and overcome them and still go on and fulfill your dreams. And that's exactly what she's doing. Really bad hand in life with, you know, childhood cancer. You know, she has, you know, a prosthesis, and she'll actually be the first in space to ever have that. So I believe she's going to deliver a very powerful and inspiring message to a lot of people. And then we have, you know, the mission pillar of generosity, right? And I have to imagine that everyone who kind of participated in that element of the crew selection process, who went to the Inspiration4 website, made a donation, probably largely did so because they wanted to help out an incredible organization like St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Because no one could possibly really think, you know, with all those odds, that, you know, when they hit pay with their credit card for that $50 donation, that they were going to really, you know, wind up in a spacesuit. But someone will, and that's great. And I think that everybody who's going to look at that and be like, wow, like these kind of things that defy the odds are possible, and you can do a lot of good along the way. And then the final, you know, crew member seat, which represents the mission pillar of prosperity. You know, I looked at all those video entries on Twitter, and clearly a lot of those people did not have, you know, established businesses before this competition. The idea that somebody could take a risk, and, you know, because creating a business is taking a pretty substantial risk, and then put it out there for the world to essentially assess and almost get feedback. And it turns out having incredible odds to go to space. Well, I think that's going to inspire a lot of people too. So we're going to hopefully inspire a lot, certainly, as to what it comes next out in space, but also all the things that can be done here on Earth. And I think every one of the crew members and the mission pillars they represent help accomplish that.
Well, thanks for explaining that. The mission pillars of Inspiration4, there are 4 of them. And you're being a typical humble leader, you're leaving out one, which is yours. Leadership, right? That's the mission pillar. As the commander of Inspiration4, and here at the Air Force Academy, their mission is to develop leaders of character. So you only know one of the other crew members right now. Can you tell us the timeline? I know there's certain people following it very closely, especially today. Can you tell us the timeline when we're going to hear about crew member 3 and 4?
So I don't even know them yet, they are going. I intentionally positioned this so I could, you know, hand to heart say that this was a completely independent and random, you know, selection process. So I know that the vetting is underway right now, and you know, there is some preliminary, you know, kind of background checks, and like, you don't want to go to space with an axe murderer. You know, there's some, you know, health assessments and such, and then, you know, if everything goes through that initial screening, well, then I'll hopefully meet both my additional crew members in about 36 hours. We'll do a little bit of a Zoom session, and then next week we'll fly out to SpaceX, where UCLA does all of the screening. So that'll be like 2 days of having been through it. That's an awful lot of tests. You end it glowing, and then we'll probably announce the full crew somewhere around, you know, March 22nd. And then we go right to training for the rest of the year. So.
And what does that training look like? You're obviously you've gone through the medical process, the vetting, just to make sure you're physically able to go to space. But you're sending 4 civilians up there in the Dragon spacecraft on top of a Falcon 9 rocket. These are not trained astronauts. They're going to be trained, but not to the level we've historically thought of. So what are you expecting in the training process?
Well, so the FAA doesn't have a designation for, for space tours. What they have is commercial astronauts. So there's 4, inexperienced people that, are going on this mission as of today. But by the end of the training curriculum, you're going to have 4 commercial astronauts. So when NASA human rates a spacecraft, they're human rating every element to it, including the training curriculum, which is certainly reduced because we're not going to space station and we're not doing an EVA, and that cuts a lot out. But other than that, the academics on the spacecraft itself, orbital mechanics, normal, abnormal procedures. We're going to live in the simulator pretty much 4 days a week, from now until launch. So that's all the normal, abnormal emergency procedures. And then we've got some fun stuff like zip lining off, pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center. We're doing some water survival training. And then I'm introducing some interesting things too. So I'll definitely be getting everybody up in a fighter aircraft to just, try and create some stresses. And then I'm going to take everybody up into the mountains and get into like a really uncomfortable situation and in some tent and some bad weather, because if anyone is, going to, freak out, I want it to happen here on Earth before it happens up in space. So everybody's going to have a lot of great training before we, we go get strapped into Dragon.
That sounds incredible. And I wanted to, we at the Space Force Association, the entire nonprofit exists to support the Space Force and the Space Force Guardians. So why are we talking to you today here? And our audience today is the majority of these cadets in person here are class of 2021. Yeah, and we've got another class we won't bring in right now, but a lot of them, we're going to give 2021. We're going to give them their due. They're graduating here in a couple months, and they just found out we've got 116 of them that are going into the Space Force. And last year, let's give them last year, just a couple months after the Space Force was created, 86 Air Force Academy graduates went immediately into the Space Force. And that's where we think it's going to hang out, around 100 per year, 96 from the Air Force Academy, and 2 from West Point and 2 from the Naval Academy, from Service Academy graduates that are going to be going into the Space Force. That's the plan right now. But it's interesting because there's a saying that, defense interests often follow economic interests. So as the economic opportunities in space, and some have talked about trillions of dollars of opportunities in space, there are going to be adversaries of the United States that we know, China and Russia specifically, in our national security strategy, it's very open. They know that the United States depends on space to fight and win America's wars. But now we've got civilians going into space this fall, and it's kind of cool that these Guardians, they got your back while you're up there. And so tell us about what you saw today in the Astro Lab that's going to give you a little confidence that you like what you saw.
Well, I mean, just right before that, like, I'm a huge believer in the need for the Space Force, and I think it's going to grow dramatically in the years ahead, because if you look at, any of the conversations I've had about Inspiration4 is, it's kind of like, it's not really pushing too many boundaries in terms of what we're doing in space. It's a low Earth orbit, mission, but it is, that first step towards a world where a lot of people are going to have the opportunity to go to space. And you don't know what it could be 50 or 100 years from now. There's going to be a lunar base. There's going to be a lunar gateway. There's going to be a Martian base. Like, these are all just eventualities, right? We don't know necessarily the timeline, but we are going to branch out beyond our world. There's no doubt. I mean, you've got, well, certainly that is absolutely Elon's, objective, and he's a pretty well capitalized person right now. He's the richest person in the world. So if he sets his sight on something, it's probably going to happen. And you're going to need guardians there to protect a lot of interests, whether it's economic and even just human life interests. Like, this is going to happen, and like, I think the domain of space is going to certainly there's an awful lot of it, right? So, but yeah, I mean, today I wish people could have seen, because of the mask. I was smiling the whole time, totally blown away. I can't imagine there are education institutions outside like the Air Force Academy that has the type of hands-on exposure to satellite technology and everything. I mean, it's almost like from birth all the way to control up in orbit. It's really incredible. I can't imagine like what all of you are going to be accomplishing, in the years ahead. I think it's going to be pretty special, so I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. I thought it was interesting how you're gonna take these 3 other people that you've never met before, and you said, I'm gonna fly them in a MiG. We're gonna go zip lining.
Yep.
Not a small zip line, and you're gonna take them up into the mountains and expose them to temperatures and conditions. They're gonna test their mental toughness. Well, for those in the audience today that have already had water survival, Mr. Isaacman's jumping off the 10 meter this afternoon at about 2:15. Mr. Pine, the athletic director, I said, hey, we want to show them all the mission elements of the Air Force Academy. You think of the academic side. You went to the Astro Lab, and it was incredible. And, our mission partner down at the airfield got the glider ride, and understand, we'd love to bring you back to get a jump one day when out of the COVID world. And then this right here is the Commandant's time. This is her time to educate the cadets, whether they're back in their room watching on YouTube Live or here in person, on those core values, on that innovation, and to take you down to the athletic department, which is another portion of this training of building leaders of character. Going to the human performance lab, I think you're going to be impressed by what they're going to show you down there, and then stepping on that 10 meter. And I'll tell you, Mr. Isaacman's response was like, let's do it. There is no option to not jump off that 10 meter. And I know some of you have stepped out there before, and you're like, I don't know. He's going to go off, and he's bringing some of his staff with him, and some of the staff at the Air Force Academy are doing it too. So if you happen to be in the area, it'll be fantastic. But what we're going to do right now is, this is the slide I wanted to show them, just to put in the cadets' minds. So in the upper left of the mission of Inspiration4, that's Mr. Isaacman, that's the leader. Haley's on the right, these are the 2 identified. He gave you the timeline of the 2 remaining. And I know there's a lot of questions, so we're going to take some time for some Q&A from the audience. We've got microphones up here, and this is a Chatham House rules. Please come on up, ask some questions. This is an opportunity, we don't get every day, so at this time, come on up. Ladies and gentlemen, come up, ask a question. Mr. Isaacman, fair game.
Sir, I'm C1C DJ Miller from Cadet Squadron 2. One of General Raymond's identified priorities is really actively engaging with our private industry partners. What suggestions do you have for us young future officers in the room to really meet that objective?
Well, from what I heard already, many have the opportunity or will have the opportunity to potentially, intern or get involvement in some of these organizations, and gotta do more of it. I mean, getting exposure like that to organizations that are thinking totally differently than we have for a very long time in aerospace, I think is really important. So I was really glad to hear it, and I think as much exposure like that and those type of opportunities, is going to just be really good and foundational for everything to come. So I mean, it sounds like that's on the right direction. I don't know how easy it is to expand upon it, but I think that kind of exposure is pretty important.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the response.
Sir, C1C JP Byrne. So my question is, so in the crew that's going up, you're saying that they're going to be trained just like commercial astronauts. So how do we bridge that gap between, the small crew of commercially trained astronauts to this future of space tourism when anyone can really go up?
Yeah, so that's why I think that we have such a big responsibility with this first mission. When I've told this before about kind of, how serious that I'm taking this, and I know how serious the crew will take it, I think back to the earliest days of Draken when we were, supporting the Air Force, and it was, look, and I, telling all our pilots and maintenance that was working on it, like half the Air Force thinks this is a good idea, half the Air Force doesn't. And if we make a mistake this early on, it will set back the timeline of something that's going to make a difference, that's going to be a real contributor, and we need to do that. I don't think Inspiration4 is any different, right? I think that if this goes really well and we execute really well on it, then I think it is going to open the door for a lot of other people to come, may not have to train to the same extent that we are intending to do so. And it's very important, right? But if we make a mistake, it will absolutely slip the timelines back, right? I mean, you could see the headlines already, like this was such a bad idea. what a mistake this was. And then what happens is it's all narrowed back to NASA astronauts, which is, they're incredible. I mean, we're totally standing on the shoulders of giants here, but you do have a better chance of getting hit by lightning than becoming a NASA astronaut. So it is a big amount of responsibility to get this right. That's why we're not like cutting any corners off the training program, but others will follow what should have it easier if we can get this right.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Great question, and we're at the Air Force Academy is very proud of the 42 astronauts that are alumni of this incredible institution, and so I'm glad you mentioned that. Next question.
Hello, sir. I'm CTC Christopher Katz, and I want thank you very much for spending this time with us. You mentioned the importance of crashing quickly and burning quickly so that you can then learn. You talked about that on a big scale with rockets. How about personally for yourself? Do you have any examples of something that you rushed into that ended up crashing, something that didn't work, but it provided data for your own personal growth?
I'm sure there's so many of them that I can't even think of them all at the moment. No question. You know what I try and do actually is I regularly go back and look at decisions I made 15, 20 years ago, 5 years ago, 5 days ago. I make a habit of doing this where I just look at emails or I look at, whether it was presentations or something, just to, look at the decisions that were made at some point in time, reflect now, could be many years past on what the outcome was and what I learned from it and how it would shape future decisions. So I actually try and look at that on a lot of things, not just like big, strategic initiatives, but, kind of tactical decisions as well to see if it was the right outcome. That's like a kind of a big part of my routine. Any, really big ones, I don't know, there's a bunch. You learn a lot over time, you learn from your mistakes, and then you have a little bit more wisdom to prevent it in the future. But yeah, certainly I think the philosophy that SpaceX has on the grand scale of going quick and learning and making mistakes and then fixing them fast and doing it all over again has served them incredibly well. Like, I don't think anyone would doubt they are 10 years ahead minimum, I would think, of anyone else in terms of, their rocket technology, right? And I think it serves everybody really well, even down to the small decisions you make every single day to, build in that time to reflect on them and such. So.
Thank you, sir, very much.
Hello, sir. My name is I'm sorry. I'm going to hold the mic now. Hello, sir. My name is CUNC Meg Cordone. I'm in Cadet Squadron 30, and my question is about specialization. So seeing your career progression go from e-commerce, then into aviation for a while, and then now into commercial space, my question is, what benefits do you think you've taken from not specializing and from kind of having this non-linear career progression? And what advice would you have for people who are kind of on the cusp of specializing versus kind of staying more broad?
Yeah, actually, I really just kind of kept things in parallel. So, I mean, still 90% plus of my time is running, Shift4 Payments, which, from the basement startup to today is about, like a third of the restaurants and hotels in the country use our payment technology and such. So I actually, really did try and stay the course on that and try and figure out ways to make it better. It started from, early on with more, operational inefficiencies that we improved upon to like, actually building interesting technology and such. So I actually did kind of stay the course on it because if you have an opportunity and you can snowball that into, subsequent ones, then, you can build a bigger, better business. And I think my aviation career is kind of really no different. I mean, it started like anyone else who's learning to fly and, tried to progress a very traditional course there through, just standard, single multi-engine jet, and then, start flying experimental aircraft and such, which it gave me exposure to, ex-military aircraft that we flew in the air shows, which said like, hey, there's a commercial opportunity that can develop from this, which turned into Draken. And then, at that point in time, I think I flew everything. I can't say I flew everything I ever wanted to because there's a lot of cool stuff that's out there. But, to me, the next like ultimate progression that I would never, think could even be possible would be operating a spacecraft in orbit. So, yeah, I actually think like, a lot of the things that have, really interest me, passions that I could focus on and try and improve, my knowledge around are rather consistent from 20 years ago to, where they are today. I do think it's kind of important, I don't, they're good like, generalists for sure on a lot of, that spread out their knowledge for a number of subjects. But I don't know, I certainly have valued, at least in my organizations, the true subject matter experts, the specialists in their field.
Thank you so much, and thank you for taking your time to speak to us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's a good question.
Yeah, great one.
Sir, C1C John. Made the same mistake. C1C John Gabriel here. So you and your Inspiration4 Mission are making a big first step in increasing civilian access to space and even the economic weight that the space industry has. Looking 15 or 20 years in the future, where do you see civilian access to space going, and what kind of economic interest will be expanded in that industry?
Wow.
Do you mind, while he's thinking, do you mind repeating it just into the microphone for our listeners at home a little bit louder? Thanks.
Sure. So the question was, looking 15 or 20 years into the future, what kind of new civilian avenues to access space will there be, and what kind of other economic avenues do you see coming forward?
That is a really, really hard question to answer, because almost everything we're seeing around us right now in terms of advances in commercial space capabilities are because there is immense access to low-cost capital. That's something really important a note, right? Like, we have, at least in history, we've never gone through a period of time of right now greater than a decade in a near zero interest rate environment. And that is making a lot of things that are happening around us right now possible that otherwise wouldn't. It's just kind of how it is in finance. So there is a heck of an assumption right now that the availability of capital will continue to remain as a critical component to advancing any of these interests, right? No matter what, payload to various orbits is going to have significant demand, and that has commercial intent too. I mean, obviously, whether it's Starlink, or DoD interests or anything else, we'll always be putting things up into orbit, and it'll be a lot lower cost to do that over the next 10 years than ever before, and that can advance all sorts of economic interests and such. But the idea of hey, there could be trillions of dollars worth of ultra rare minerals and such. I mean, first, there's an element of it that is a supply and demand thing. It's worth potentially trillions now because we can create a fraction of a gram of it. When you actually haul that thing back, it might change the the pricing a little bit. But all of that is dependent on the availability of capital. Elon, he is the richest person in the world. He has a heck of a following. I think he will continue to be able to generate the capital he needs to get to Mars and beyond. And that's important if we are talking in the context of human beings, everyday people continuing to be able to go up in space. But just so people can appreciate what it takes for that to happen right now, you're talking about a program that probably will eclipse the Manhattan Project. Starship doesn't just go from there to from here to there. There's going to be multiple space-based refueling. That's never been done before on that level, through gateways from here to Mars. Get there, the ability to kind of manufacture propellant in order to come home again, and all of that has to work with such a degree of reliability and safety to make it so that a lot of other people want to go and go on that journey, and that all takes unbelievable amounts of capital. So all these things I do think are inevitable, but it's why I gave that kind of caveat of, I don't know if it's 50 years or 100 years before we have those things. It will happen, but capital is going to be a critical component being able to drive it. And that's also why I think, not to just continue to be the fanboy of Elon and such, Starlink was such a brilliant idea, because that does have such great commercial intent, the ability to disrupt broadband and communications on a pretty big scale to fund this great endeavor so that you can have a lot of people going up in space. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, great question. Thanks.
First of all, thank you, sir, for your time. Second, I wanted to say at the age of 16, my age of 16 was not nearly as impressive as yours, but my question deals with mentorship, particularly how, if you were to, I guess I'll go into detail, how did mentorship help you to get to where you are right now, and what were some close mentors that you have for the audience, sir?
So I really had two mentors. That's a great question, by the way. Thank you. I had two mentors. One for sure is my father. He definitely taught me an awful lot of things as I was progressing through my business career. It was actually probably one of the most rewarding things in my life to be able to work with him as much as I did. Very diplomatic individual, great problem solver. It's pretty important in business. There's an awful lot of problems that come up all the time. And what he did is he balanced out my other mentor, who, if you met this person, you would think they came right off the show The Sopranos. This was a tough love environment for a very long time. Really the exact opposite of diplomacy, very aggressive. But there's no doubt that between the two of them, like I'm the business person I am today because of both their influences. And maybe I was, luckier than I ever appreciated to have, two mentors on such opposite ends of the spectrum in like almost every way possible to help kind of shape my career. So absolutely, like it is. Like you obviously, as time goes on, no matter how much you think you know at any point, there's so much more still to learn. A lot of life experiences kind of contribute and help develop that wisdom. If you can get it from somebody else, it's only an advantage, right? Because you're learning it that much quicker than they did, and that much quicker than maybe some of your peers are. So certainly big supporter of having mentorship as you grow as a person, leader, individual, and such.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks for that question. We're running out of time. These cadets need to go and get to that astro class and calculus and all the things that learn about orbital dynamics. And we're really happy that we do have some corporate sponsorships to make events like this happen at the Space Force Association. And we wanted to acknowledge CACI International who put this thing on today. And before we bring them up, they'd like to give you a little gift. You said something to me today that I'd like you to share with these cadets. And you're obviously a very successful businessman, and you've looked at a lot of resumes. And this goes to one of the questions we had earlier, but can you tell them what you told me about what you think of Service Academy graduates?
Oh, this was just a lunch conversation. It was very casual. I didn't know you were going to bring it up. But no, I basically said that, when you do see, resumes and you see a service academy, as an education institution, you immediately know that you're dealing with, a certain caliber of individual, very, well-educated person who's, had multiple values instilled in them that, many others, if they do get them, it'll develop over a longer period of time in life than those that have graduated from a service academy. So certainly is a standout to me whenever I've looked at resumes.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. And we're going to bring up Mr. Dave Armitage, call sign Flick, was a weapons systems operator in F-15 Strike Eagles and also an air officer commanding here at the Air Force Academy, who now works for CACI International. And Dave, if you don't mind, come on up, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt. And thanks again to the Space Force Association for organizing this event. A really awesome time. And Jared, on behalf of the over 23,000 CACI employees around the globe, we just want to say thank you. Thank you for not only inspiring the 4,000 cadets here at the Air Force Academy, but for inspiring the entire world with your Inspiration4 Mission. It's really special. So we'd like to present you a small token of our appreciation. This thing is really special, and we don't want to only have it commemorate your visit here to the Air Force Academy, but we want it to represent the 116 future Space Force Guardians that are in the room with us today. So let's take a look at this thing.
Let's come on up here.
Wow.
So we hope you wear it with pride as the mission commander of Inspiration4, knowing that these guardians got your back and will keep you and your crew safe while you're up here. They'll be doing their jobs down here. And as the Space Force Guardians say, Semper Supra, and as we at CACI say, stay ever vigilant. Thanks again for doing this. Thanks for all you do, and please stay safe.
Oh, thank you very much. This is going to orbit, by the way, guys.
Yeah.
No question.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Matt.
it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. For those watching at home, we appreciate you tuning in. I'm going to bring up your Cadet Wing Commander one last time. I want to brag about Emily. She's a senior going to Oxford, then on to pilot training. Emily, the floor is yours.
Mr. Isaacman and Colonel Anderson, thank you both so much for your time today, for sharing your stories, words of wisdom for us, for all the folks in the room, folks tuning in on Teams. Really appreciate it, and we'll certainly carry these words of wisdom and inspiration forward with us into the Air and Space Forces. So thank you both so much for your time. And to everyone in here, thank you for your time. Thanks for attending in person. Thanks to everyone on Teams. And with that, you all are dismissed. Room, Tin Chut.